Hey everybody, my name is Ryan with Alder Branch Homestead, and today we're gonna make some keychains. We've got a bunch of different, well, not a bunch of different types, but a couple variations of the keychains that we're gonna make. This is a perfect beginner project. So if you haven't made anything out of leather or you've just made a couple projects, this is an excellent project. Also, if you want links to any of the tools or anything that I use in this video, you can find those in the description. They are affiliate links, so if you use those links, I might get a small commission, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. And without further ado, let's get into it. So this is a perfect beginner project, a keychain. All you need is a little bit of leather, some thread maybe, snap, maybe a rivet, and you're done. Just takes a couple minutes. Obviously, if you're going to stamp a pattern in it, it takes a little bit longer. But just as a quick preview to that, let's do something even simpler. So, if all you have is a scrap of leather, we can actually could just use those holes right there, but let's just cut that off. Maybe we want it. Actually, let's have our keychain look like that. That looks pretty cool. And all we really need is a hole. Actually, probably should double check. Let's hope that's big enough. Right about there. There we go. So now we've got a hole, and we can actually use one of these little snap rings, and that could be our keychain. Of course, you could use a regular split ring, though we'll leave a little bit of mark on there, but if you want, that's about as simple as it gets. All you needed was a ring, leather, and a hole. So that's that. But back to our real project. It's almost that simple. So, all you really need is a strip of leather and some hardware. These are, get these out of the way, 1 inch HK snaps, they call them. They come in a bunch of different sizes. I think this is just about as small as they get. I think they get up to maybe 2 inches or so, but a pretty cool little snap. And they work great for all sorts of things. Obviously, you can clip these on another ring, yeah, a key ring or whatever, clip them on belt loop. And they also work really good if you have like eye bolts or something like that. So I guess you could use it on like a guitar strap. You had an eye bolt for your guitar, or some cameras. I can't remember the brand. Actually, use a eye bolt to connect up straps and stuff like that. So these are super handy, and you can get a big bag of them for cheap online. So it's a great option for making a project like this. Oh, also one side note before we get too sidetracked on the note of the hardware. I think technically this is the front side, quote unquote, and this is the back side. In reality, it doesn't really matter. So, whatever side you like, whatever direction you like hooking things in, like if you're going to put it on your belt loop and you want to go this way, line up that way, the other way, the other way. Now, let's just pick an end of our leather. They're both identical. So, I guess we'll go with this one. We're going to mark our stitch inset, which is just going to be 5 millimeters, which is just my regular stitch inset. Then we're going to pick a side, which is going to be the front, and I guess we'll go with that side. Get our leather through and fold it in half. And we need this snug, but not too snug. It's better to err on the side of too loose, because then we won't have any issues with stitching, as opposed to if you do it too tight, that could give you trouble. And you don't have to worry too much about this being loose, because this isn't like a thin nylon strap where you could have issues with this twisting around and getting messed up. This leather is pretty wide, and the fit is tight enough, and the leather is stiff enough that that's just not going to be an issue. So, fold it over, fairly snug, get it on the edge of your anvil, and we're just going to take a 4-prong stitching iron, at least in my case. Make sure you line up with whatever width you're using, but in my case, 4-prong works pretty good, and we're just going to eyeball the center of that. That looks about right to me. And we're just going to give this a nice solid punch through our leather. And look at that. We're all lined up. That all looks good. So now we're just on to stitching. So a note with the length of thread for this. So on a normal project, I'm probably going to use about 4 times the seam length plus a little for good luck. And in this case, I'm actually going to do about double that. So roughly 8 plus a little for good luck. And the reason for this is the shorter the run, the less sort of wiggle room you have to get taken up by the length of the needle. So each time you make a stitch, you need the length of this needle in slack. And then in addition to that, we're going to have these loops around the edge, and that's going to take up a little bit more thread. So about 8, as crazy as that sounds, is about what we need. So we'll just thread up our needle. Then we'll lock our thread into place here just by stabbing through the thread. All right, that's needle 1. And I don't think that was on camera, but I cut this thread at a little bit of an angle, and that makes threading up your needles a lot easier. All right, now we've got the thread locked on our other needle. So now we're going to do this just like any other saddle stitch. We're going to get our thread into the first hole. Then we're going to even up our needles, and then we're just going to do a wrap around the outside. Just like that. And one more on this side. So we have a double wrap. You could do a single wrap if you'd like, but especially because of a trick I'm going to show you in a minute, the double wrap looks really good. And now this is just a basic saddle stitch across. So I'm going to put my right needle in, pull it most of the way snug, drape it on the top of my left needle, put my left needle in, pull that most of the way snug, and then just catch this loop and pull everything tight. And then it's just rinse and repeat for the next 2 stitches, I guess, is what we have left. So, right needle in, drape it across the top, left needle in, snag that loop, pull it tight, right needle in, pull it most of the way snug, left needle in, pull it partly snug, and just through that loop there, pull that snug. Now we're to the end of our stitch line, but we'll do a loop around the edge so it matches on both sides. Make sure you're not catching an extra loop of thread. And we'll just make sure we're not snagging any thread there. That last one can be a little bit tough to get through. So that's all of our regular stitching done. And what we're going to do here is normally I would just do a 1.5 stitches to lock in this thread. But because this is so small, that's going to look really obvious. This side is going to be all doubled up and this side won't. So I'm just going to take that extra stitch to the end so that we look like that, and then cut off our thread. And another note here is when I am going back over my stitches to lock everything in, I don't actually catch that loop. And I don't know why this works the way it does, but I honestly don't notice any difference between not doing that. And that saves you a little bit of time not catching that. So I'm just going to stitch these next couple stitches. And this last one, just pass this thread through. So we end up with both of our tails on the back. We'll pull that snug. Cut these tails off short. You want a little bit of a tail, but in this case, shorter is just a little bit better than longer. Then we're going to grab a lighter and just melt those ends. And watch out. That is hot plastic that you're going to touch your finger into. But a little bit of practice, can't feel it at all. You can also just use the metal here if you want to heat it and then just blot it out like that. And with that, we're all done. If we wanted to, we can cut an angle. Watch your fingers. And there we have our keychain. And then if we wanted to add maybe some decorative lines, that's easy enough to do. We can just use the 5mm from our stitch line. And then we end up with a nice crease there. If you have a creaser, you could totally use that. Hot crease could be good. You could also come back and cut that in with like a swivel knife. You could bevel this. You could stamp it. You could do whatever you want. The sky's the limit. On this one, I actually stamped this first. So I cut it all to length, punched the holes, and then no, actually, I didn't punch the holes. I cut it to length, I stamped the pattern, and then I punched the holes after that. That worked pretty good. And yeah, you can decorate this however you want. You could paint these, you could dye these, you could put antique, you could slick the edges, all that kind of good stuff. And this is an alternative. So we're just going to rivet it. And this is a burr rivet. So if you're unfamiliar with these are the kind of rivets that you have on things like blue jeans. So they're pretty simple to use, but there's a little bit of a trick to them, and they can trip people up. So let's look at that. And here is my rivet and the burr. And there's a couple things to keep in mind with these. One is that they come in different sizes. So this is a number 9 rivet. I have some ones that are a little bit smaller. I think these are a 12. And the nice thing about these rivets is that we're actually going to cut this excess post off. So normally with rivets, you have to size them just about perfectly for the thickness of your leather. These, it doesn't matter. I can just have a big box of number 9 rivets, and yeah, it's a little bit more expensive to having that extra length that's going to go to waste. But the good news is I only need to stock one size of these, right? If I have number 9s, I can do leather up to this, right? And so on and so forth for these number 12. And then the other thing, well, we'll get to the other thing in a minute because it has to do with setting it. So all we need to do is to run our leather through, figure out where the middle of our leather is, and honestly, the easiest way to do this is to guess and check. So I'm going to guess. Now, in reality, it's a 1/2 inch, but this divider is in metric, and aside from knowing what the numbers I use are, I have no idea what they mean. So this is apparently going to be 13.5 to the middle of this. But so actually, I guess we'll keep the quote unquote front on the front here. And all we need to do is pull out a piece of leather. I've lightly, actually, goes on the back, but we will lightly mark in a second. So we will take our rivet, make sure that we actually have enough space there. Then we will need about there. Mark our center point. Then we will take some punches. And by the way, test these first. That's where these little holes came from. So make sure that you're punching the right hole. Is trying to punch another one is a little tricky. If it's a bigger hole you need, that's not bad. But if you've punched one that's too small, that's a bummer. And you can do a test little squeeze there to make sure you're in the right ballpark. And we're just going to punch that. There's 2 layers of leather, so make sure that you got all the way through there. Give it a twist to make sure that everything is good. Then we just, where did I just put my rivet? There it rolled off to. Just going to slide our rivet through and make sure that you use the right hole punch, like I said. Oh, there we go. And there we go. And you want the post side on the front of your piece, because that's where we're going to get that. Then we just need our burr, and then we just need a setting tool. That's the bummer about these, is you need a setting tool, and it's actually a different size for each of them. So this is a number 9 setter, and for the 10 I have a separate one. And we're just going to line that hole up on top of there. And actually, I'm going to use a bigger maul there and just well, per usual, I was yapping away and forgot the first trick. You don't need a punching mat, just your anvil to set this. All right, set that good and snug. You can't set it too many times, so if you want to just give it an extra wrap, that's all good. Now here comes the the real trick I intended to tell you, and that's that when you cut the extra post off, you almost can't cut it too short. And in fact, if you run into trouble, it's almost always going to be because you cut that too tall. And looking at that now, that might actually be a hair tall, so I'm going to take a little bit more of a pass off of that. If you have any metal bits flying around, make sure you get those well off of your desk, because they're going to mar up whatever leather you have. And now we just need to mushroom this over. I kind of like to start it out with a hammer, like that. And then to get it nice and round, right next to the setting hole, we actually have a doming die. We just line that up like that. And knock a bunch of stuff off your desk. And there we are, a nice domed rivet. So what sometimes can happen if you cut the post too long, it's actually mushroomed over, is holding that burr down. So there's a little bit of a friction because the hole in the burr is just smaller than the post. That's why when you set it on top, show you one more time, I can't just push these together. The point is tapered so you can get it lined up to start, but after that, it's a pretty tight fit. So you have to hammer that burr on. But when you hammer on top of this, physics lesson real quick, when you hammer on top of this, you're actually going to be, you're only putting force into the post. So that's actually going to pull forward, and the burr is actually going to slide up because this is mushrooming over, but the burr is going to be set all the way at the bottom. And if the mushroom is too high, you actually have a microscopic gap that the burr will actually loosen. And at first you might say, oh, well, now I can just put the setter back on and fix that. no, you've mushroomed over the top, so you can't fit the setter back on. So if you go to set this and your burr loosens up, you have to start over. So cut it off, and next time, cut your post a little bit shorter, and that's all there is to it. Other than that, I really like these rivets. And once you get over that first hurdle, they're super easy and fast to use. You don't need a million sizes on hand, just whatever head size you want, and you're good to go. So there's a nice, quick, easy project. Let's see, how many did we end up today? There's all the ones we made and all the ones I had at the start, and that took what? Just a couple of minutes a piece, especially for those burrs. Once you have all your tooling set up, boom, you're done. You want to tool it, yeah, that takes a little bit of time, but hey, there are your options, and anybody can do this. It's super easy, super fun. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Oh, forgot the other one we made. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.